Good morning, class 10th. Now, after the completion of lesson 1 from economics, we are going to start the second chapter of economics, and the title of the chapter is Sectors of the Indian Economy. So, we are continuing the second chapter of economics. Now, when we say sectors of the Indian economy, it means we are talking about which are the main sector which gives so much of enhancement in per capita income of India. What are these sectors? Primary, secondary, and tertiary, and how and what type of people are involved in it, and how we categorize the different types of economic activity. Now, there are many activities that are undertaken by directly using natural resources. Take, for example, cultivation of cotton. It takes place within a crop season for the growth of the cotton plant. We depend mainly, but not entirely, on natural factors like rainfall, sunshine, and climate. The product of this activity, cotton, is a natural product. Similarly, in the case of activity like dairy, we are dependent on the biological process of the animals and availability of fodder, etc. The product here, milk, also a natural product. Similarly, minerals and ores are also natural products. When we produce a good by exploiting natural resources, it is an activity of the primary sector. Why primary? The question is arises, if we are involving all these activity in a primary sector, what is the meaning of primary sector? This is because it forms the base for all other products. Primary sector is called the primary as it gives the foundation, or it becomes the basis of for all the other products that subsequently make. Since most of the natural products we get from agriculture, dairy, fishing, forestry, so that's why this sector is known as primary sector. That's why when we say primary sector, so we usually referred it to with agriculture and related sector. Now, so agriculture, fishery, dairy, forestry are the primary sector activity. Now, secondary sector. The secondary sector covers activities in which natural products are changed into other forms through a way of manufacturing that we associate with industrial activity. Okay, it is the next step after primary. The product is not produced by nature but has to be made by, therefore, some process of manufacturing is essential. As we get wood from natural resource, tree, and then when we get paper, then in the secondary sector we use this wood and do so many chemical, you can say, changes, and then we have papers for our notebook and books. This could be in a factory, a workshop, or at home. For example, using cotton fiber from the plant, we spin yarn and weave cloth. Using sugarcane as a raw material, we make sugar or gur. We convert earth into bricks and use bricks to make houses and buildings. Since this sector gradually became associated with the different kinds of industry that came up, it is also called as industrial sector. Now, after primary and secondary sector, there is a third category of activity that falls under tertiary sector and is different from the above two sectors. These activities are help in the development of the primary and secondary sector. These activities by themselves do not produce a good, but they are an aid or a support for the production process. For example, goods that are produced in the primary or secondary sector would need to be transported by trucks or trains and then sold in wholesale or retail shops. At times, it may be necessary to store these in godowns. We also may need to talk to the others, telephone or send letters, communication, or borrow money from banks to help production and trade. Transport, storage, communication, banking, and trade are some example of tertiary sectors or tertiary activity. Since these activities generate services rather than goods, the tertiary sector is also called the service sector. Okay, so here are mainly three types of economic sectors, Indian economic sector. One is primary, then secondary and tertiary. In primary sector, we produce the base for the remaining two sectors. Agriculture, dairy, fishing, forestry comes under primary sector. Then secondary sector is basically to provide the job, and it is also called the service sector, where manufacturing has been done of the primary sector's material available. Then transportation, communication, banking, trading, they are called tertiary sector. Okay, now service sector also includes some essential services that may not directly help in the production of goods. For example, we require teachers, doctors, and those who provide personal services such as washermen, barbers, cobblers, lawyers, and people to do administrative and accounting works. In recent times, certain new services based on information technology such as internet, cafe, ATM booths, call centers, software companies, etc. have become important. Okay, so service sector is the sector which are also known as the tertiary sector, as it provides the services to the people. That's why it is also known the service sector. Now, comparing all these three sectors, okay, the various production activities in the primary sector, secondary, and the tertiary sector produce a very large number of goods and services. Also, the three sectors have a large number of people working in them, produce these goods and services. The next step, therefore, is to see how much goods and services are produced and how many people work in each sector. In an economy, there could be one or more sectors which are dominant in terms of total population and employment, while other sectors are relatively small in size. Now, how do we count the various goods and services and know the total production in each sector? With so many thousands of goods and services produced, you might think this is an impossible task. Not only would the task be enormous, you might also wonder how we can add up cars and computer and nails and furniture. It won't make sense. You are right in thinking so. To get around this problem, Enormous suggests that the value of goods and services should be used rather than adding up the actual numbers. For example, if 10,000 kg of wheat is sold at rates 8 per kg, the value of wheat will be 80,000. The value of 5,000 coconuts at rates 10% coconut will be rates 50,000. Similarly, the value of goods and services in the three sectors are calculated and then added up. Remember, there is one precaution has to taken. Not every good or service that is produced and sold needs to be counted. It makes sense only to include the final goods and services. Take for instance a farmer who sells wheat to a flour mill, okay, for rates 8 per kg. The mill grinds the wheat and sells the flour to a biscuit company for 10 per kg. You can see that how the farmers selling the wheat to the mill or mill worker at 8 per kg, and then they are converting the wheat into flour, and then they are selling this flour to the market more than 2 rupees you can say surplus, and it becomes the 10 kg per kg to the consumer. The biscuit company uses the flour and things such as sugar and oil and make 4 packets of biscuit. It sells biscuit in the market to the consumer for rate 60, rate 15 per packet. Now you can see 8, 10 and 15. So how they are getting the advantages, the biscuit company, and then the how this burden is just on the shoulder of the consumer. Biscuits are the final goods. Okay, so on the basis of the final goods, we are taking the you can say taking the average of the income. Now goods that reach to the consumer. So finally, who is in the benefit? The biscuit company. Now, why are only final goods and service counted? Now the matter is that why only the final and the finished goods and services is counted. In the contrast to the final goods, goods such as wheat and the wheat flour in the example are intermediate goods. Yes, wheat and flour are the intermediate. And what is a finished good? Biscuits. Intermediate goods are used up in the producing final goods and services. The value of final goods already includes the value of all intermediate goods that are used in making the final good. Hence, the value of rate 60 for the biscuit already includes the value of flour, and similarly the value of all other intermediate goods would have been included. To count the value of flour and wheat separately is therefore not correct, because then we would be counting the value of the same things a number of times, first as wheat, then as flour, and finally as biscuits. The value of final goods and services produced in each sector during a particular year provides the total production of the sector for that year, and the sum of production in three sectors gives us what is called the gross domestic product. So what is GDP? GDP stands for gross domestic product, and it is the sum of production in all three sectors are called gross domestic product of a nation. It is the value of all final goods and services produced within a country during a particular year. What is the GDP? GDP is the value of all finished goods and services which are produced within a country during a particular time or year. GDP shows how big the economy is. Now you understood that if you want to calculate any nations or countries progress, economical growth, then we see their GDP growth. Okay, GDP gives us the fair idea. In India, the mammoth task of measuring GDP is undertaken by a central government ministry. This ministry, with the help of various government departments of all the Indian states and union territories, collects information relating to total volume of goods and services and their prices, and then estimates the GDP. In India, it is done by the central government. Historical changes in sectors. Now, how these primary, secondary and tertiary sectors historically changed, we will come to know. Generally, it has been noted from the histories of many how developed country that at initial stage of development, primary sector was the most important of all economic activity, as it is a foundation or the base for other secondary and tertiary sector. As the method of farming changed and agriculture sector began to prosper, it produced much more food than before. Many people could now take up other activities. There were increasing number of craft person and trader. Buying and selling activities increased many times. Besides, there were also transporters also. Now, administrators, army, etc. However, at this stage, most of the goods produced were natural products from the primary sector, and the most people were also employed in this sector over a long time, more than 100 years, and especially because new method of manufacturing were introduced. Factories came up and started expanding. Those people who had earlier worked on farms now began to work in factories in a large number. People began to use many more goods that were produced in a factory at cheap rates. Secondary sector gradually became the most important in total production and employment. Hence, over a time, shift had taken place. This means the importance of the sector has changed totally. In the past 100 years, there has been a further shift from secondary to tertiary sector in developed countries. The service sector has become the most important in terms of total production. Most of the working people are employed in the service sector. This is the general pattern observed in the developed country. What is the total production and employment in three sectors in India? Over the years, have there been changes similar to the pattern observed for the developed country? We shall see in next section. Now, rising importance of the tertiary sector in production. It is important. Over the 40 years between 1971 to 72, and 2011 to 2012. While production in all three sectors has increased because population is increasing, it has increased the most in the tertiary sectors. As a result, in the year 2011 to 12, the tertiary sector has emerged as the largest producing sector in India, replacing the primary sector. It is important, okay, that how the tertiary sector has emerged as a most developed sector in India. Now, why is the tertiary sector becoming so important in India? There could be several reasons. First, in any country, several services such as hospitals, educational institutions, post and telegraph services, police stations, courts, village administrative offices, municipal corporation, defense, transport, banks, insurance companies, etc. are required. We know that we all are doing all our day-to-day life, and anytime anyhow we need all these departments for our survival. This can be considered a basic service. Okay, all these things are considered as a basic services. In a developing country, the government has to take responsibility for the provision of these services, and India is a developing country. Second, the development of agriculture industry leads to the development of service such as transport, trade, storage, and the like, as well as we have already seen. Greater the development of the primary and secondary sector, more would be the demand for such services. Third, as income levels rise, certain section of people start demanding many more services like eating out, tourism, shopping, private hospital, private school, professional training, etc. You can see the change quite sharply in the cities, especially in big cities. Fourth reason that why the importance of tertiary sector has emerged and become more important than primary sector in India. The fourth reason, over the past decade or so, certain new services such as those based on information and communication technology have become important and essential. The production of these services has been rising rapidly. Okay, now, however, you must remember that not all the service sector is growing equally well. Service sector in India employs many different kinds of people. At one end, there are limited number of services that employ highly skilled and educated workers. At the other end, there are very large number of workers engaged in service such as small shopkeeper, repair person, transport person, etc. These people barely manage to earn a living, and yet they perform these services because no alternative opportunities for work are available to them, as they are not skilled enough, they are not trained, they are not so much educated and knowledgeable. Hence, only a part of this sector is growing in importance. You shall read more about it in the next chapter. Now, why are most of the people employed? Now, we can directly see that in India, a remarkable fact about India is that while there has been a change in the share of three sectors in GDP, a similar shift has not taken place in employment. Okay, and there are various graphs has been given on the basis of particular years, which show that it is true. The primary sector continues to be the largest employer even now. Okay, and then why didn't a similar shift of primary sector happen in the case of employment? It is because not enough jobs were created in the secondary and tertiary sectors. Okay, the reason is that in secondary and tertiary sector, the enough jobs are not created. Even though industrial output or the production of goods went up by more than 9 times during the period, employment in the industry went up by around 3 times. The same applied to the tertiary sector as well. While production in the services sector rose by more than 14 times, employment in the service sector rose around 5 times. As a result, more than half of the workers in the country are working in the primary sector, mainly in agriculture, producing only quarter of the GDP. In contrast to this, the secondary and tertiary sector produce 3/4 of the produce, whereas they employ less than half the people. Does this mean that the workers in agriculture are not producing as much as they could? What it means is that there are more people in agriculture than necessary. So even if you move a few people out, production will not be affected. In other words, workers in agricultural sector are underemployed. For instance, take the case of a small farmer, Lakshmi, owning about 2 hectares of unirrigated land, dependent only on rain and growing crops like jowar and arhar. All 5 members of her family work in the plot throughout the year. Why? They have nowhere else to go for work. You will see that everyone is working. None remains idle, but in actual fact, their labor effort gets divided. Each one is doing the some work, but no one is fully employed. This is the situation of underemployment. So this is the situation of what is underemployment, where we are having to do work but we are not getting sufficient amount of money and our wages are not fixed, where people are apparently working but all of them are made to work less than their potential. This kind of underemployment is hidden in contrast to someone who does not have a job and is clearly visible as unemployed. Hence it is also called disguised unemployment. So although they are doing something, they are not sitting idly, lekin still it is not that we cannot count them as an employed person, because they are having more than potential but it is not utilizing at right time. That's why they are known as disguised, they come under the disguised unemployment. Now supporting a landlord, Sukhram comes and hires 1 or 2 members of family to work on his land. Lakshmi family is now able to earn some extra income through wages, since you do not need 5 people look after the small plot. 2 people moving out does not affect production on their farm. In the above example, 2 people may move to work in a factory. Once again, the earning of the family would increase and they would also continue to produce as much from their land. There are lakhs of farmers like Lakshmi in India. This means that even if we remove a lot of people from agricultural sector and provide them with proper work elsewhere, agricultural production will not suffer. So here there is a need in India that we have to reduce the people from agricultural sector. We need to transform the farmers into the working class people. Okay, the income of the people who take up other work would increase the total family income. The underemployment can also happen in other sectors. For example, there are thousands of casual workers in the service sector in urban area who search for daily employment. They are employed as painters, plumber, repair persons and other doing odd jobs. Many of them don't find work every day. Similarly, we see other people of the service sector on the street pushing a cart or selling something, where they may spend the whole day but earn very little. They are doing this work because they do not have better opportunities. And why they do not have better opportunity? As they are not skillful and educated enough. Now, how to create more employment? Now the question arises that how we can create more employment in the country. From the above discussion, we can see that there continues to be considerable underemployment in agriculture. There are also people who are not employed at all. In what ways can one increase employment for people? India is having this urgent need. Let us look some of them. Take the case of Lakshmi with her 2 hectare plot of unirrigated land. The government can spend some money or banks can provide a loan to construct a well for her family to irrigate the land. Lakshmi will then be able to irrigate her land and take a second crop, wheat, during the Rabi season. Let us suppose the 1 hectare of wheat can provide employment to 2 people for 50 days. Okay, then application and so 2 more members of the family can be employed in her own field. Now suppose a new dam is constructed and canals are dug to irrigate many such farms. This could lead to a lot of employment generation within the agricultural sector itself, reducing the problem of underemployment. Now Suppose Lakshmi and other farmers produce much more than before. They would also need to sell some of this. For this, they may be required to transport their products to a nearby town, and it if the government invests some money in transportation and storage of crops, or makes better rural roads to the mini trucks reach everywhere, several farmers like Lakshmi, who now have access to water, can continue grow and sell these crops in the market. This activity can provide productive employment not just farmer but also the others, such as those in service like transport or trade. Lakshmi need is not confined to water alone to cultivate the land. She also needs seeds, fertilizers, agriculture equipment, and pump sets to draw water. Being a poor farmer, she cannot afford many of these, so she will have to borrow money from moneylenders and pay a high rate of interest. If the local bank gives her credit at a reasonable rate of interest, she will be able to buy all these in all time and cultivate her land. This means that along with her and along with water, we also need to provide cheap agriculture credit to the farmer for farming to the improve, and we will look at some of these needs in another chapter. So this is the way that how we can come out with the problem of the more and more people who are underdeveloped. How can we solve their problems to create new employment? Okay, so we will continue the chapter till then in the next video. Till then, take care and goodbye.